You're listening to the Limitless Leadership Podcast, the podcast designed to help automotive repair shops learn how to lead, coach, train, and manage their team better by sharing proven techniques and thought-provoking interviews from industry leaders. Are you ready to transform your leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results? Let's get ready for liftoff. It's time to go from great to greater. Here's today's episode.
Welcome back to the Limitless Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Parnell, and today our guest is a friend of mine. Our guest today is the content director for the Auto Care Association. She's a brand builder. She's a content creator. She's a mother and a wife. Our guest today is Jacki Lutz. Jacki, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, Jacki, as always, I'm excited for our audience to get to know who our guest is. So I'm going to pass the mic to you right now and just ask for you to share who you are, what you do, how you do it, all the things that we need to know about Jacki.
Sure. Like you said, I am the content director at the Auto Care Association, which is super duper fun. I'm kind of new to this role. I'm about 6 months in right now. It's a role that they created based off of a lot of the work I used to do kind of in my own time with my old role. I used to work for a manufacturer, primarily in the automotive aftermarket, and I used to do a lot of content creation on the side just for the industry in general and kind of usually encouraging people to get more involved. And I was very involved on different associations. A lot of them were part of the Auto Care Association, just always trying to promote all the different opportunities here in the industry. And to my surprise, that turned into an actual role recently. So now I get to work for the Auto Care Association directly. And my primary job right now is doing our Auto Care On Air podcast, which has been really fun. We just launched it in July and having a blast figuring out that whole world, which I'm sure you know everything about. I don't know if people realize how much work is behind what you do. So,
Jacki, I wish I knew everything about podcasting. I still feel like a fish out of water plenty of times, as I'm sure you might be feeling in this new season of podcasting life yourself. But I really appreciate you being here. Your podcast is called Carpool Conversations. So if you're listening, be sure to check out Jacki's podcast called Carpool Conversations. In fact, I guess, Jacki, before I move on to the next question, share with us what is your podcast about? Why the term Carpool Conversations? To me, that's catchy, but I'm curious, what do you talk about in the Carpool Conversations?
Yeah, sure. So just to back up a second, so Auto Care On Air really consists of 4 different shows, but it's one podcast. Auto Care On Air is the podcast, and it has 4 shows in it. We have one that's called Indicators that focuses on really data and how to read data. We have one called Traction Control, which is all around news stories around the automotive aftermarket and the auto repair industry. And we have one called The Driver's Seat, which is really profiling CEOs with all around the industry, in and out of the industry. And then we have mine, which is called Carpool Conversations. And that one really focuses on professional development. And I love it because I obviously love professional development. This is not a virtual background. I'm a big nerd when it comes to self-help books and figuring out how I can do things better and communicate better and lead better. And so I get to do this fun show. And the fun thing about my show, the Carpool Conversations one, is it's usually a panel. It's at least 3 people, sometimes 4 people. And it's supposed to be kind of like you're just sitting in a car together talking about a topic. We pick a professional development topic. We try to have some fun with it. We let ourselves get off topic. We try to, keep it entertaining, but also give our audience some takeaways at the end of the day. So I get to do a lot of things I love in one show. So it's been a blast.
Good for you. I love hearing that. And by the way, you referenced your background. I'm glad you brought this up because I also am a huge reader. I love seeing all those books. I was going to comment on it later, but if you're listening to the episode, feel free to join or to tune into the YouTube channel at The Bearded Leader, and you can see all of the books behind Jacki. I'm going to put you on the spot, Jacki, right now and ask, of all the books that I'm seeing or all the books that you have that you've read before, give me like your top 3. What's been the most impactful books that you've read?
I know these because they're that good. And I've read them like 12 times. I have an annual read called The 4 Agreements. Have you heard of The 4 Agreements?
I literally had it on my desk right before.
Oh, did you? Oh my God.
Love that book. Yeah, that's in my top 5 as well.
I can't get enough of it. It's a nice short read. It's usually my January month read. I read it at the beginning of the year, every single year, and try to remember it. Yeah. It's done wonders for my life, frankly. And then probably it's so typical, but Starts With Why by Simon Sinek. I'm a huge Simon Sinek fangirl. I love him and I read all of his books. But I think Starts with Why is one I did back when I was earning my MBA. And I actually based my thesis off of some of the things he said in that book. So I really had a lot of time to study it. And I follow a lot of that with the things that I do in my career.
Love that. Okay. So, by the way, I'm glad you mentioned the Four Agreements. That has been a massively impactful book for me as well. So that's encouraging to hear that other people are getting, all that kind of impact from it as well. So, being a professional development, I'll call you a guru, Jacki, a professional development guru, because people who pour themselves into professional development, you're obviously a lifelong learner. You're committed to having a good growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Let me ask you, how does that translate into your leadership? Because all the information that you're getting, we're retaining as much as we can. We're getting a lot of information, trying to retain it, and now apply it into our leadership roles or into our everyday role as a leader. How has this impacted you as a leader?
That's such a good question. I think the biggest thing is it's a term I actually learned in my previous life at my previous company. I had a manager one time say that because I got promoted like every year and a half, 2 years. They'd give me things that I knew nothing about. I remember one time they gave me e-commerce. They wanted to start doing something with e-commerce and they wanted me to run it. And I'm like, me? Like, I don't know anything about e-commerce, but there's something about they use the word fellowship. And I never really knew what that was, but I think a lot of what I learn, I do it on the spot. I do it on the fly. I'm not afraid to fail, and I'm not afraid for people on my team to fail. I like to look at it like it's kind of fun to fail and learn what worked, and then we can tweak that and try something else, and let's see if it works. And if it doesn't, why not? And then let's tweak that and try again, and like kind of look at it like it's fun. So, like even in this role, starting this podcast, I think I was 2 weeks in when I mentioned like, hey, let's do this podcast, kind of gave my ideas for it, and they were all into it. And I think we launched 3 months later. And we easily could have waited on that, right? We could have waited till everything was absolutely perfect, that we knew all of the information we possibly could. But there's something about building the plane while you're flying it. You're forced to learn. And I think if you have you can give the right inspiration to a team and you can help them see your vision. You can communicate that vision and what this could look like a year from now. I think that translates a lot from what I learn, from other leaders that really inspire me.
Jacki, I think the two words that come to mind when I think about a challenge that a lot of folks have is simply taking action. So taking action is those two words. And you're talking about how even when you may not feel like you're completely ready or fully prepared, or it's never going to be perfect. We know it's never going to be perfect. But the name of the game is progress and trying something, probably making mistakes along the way, maybe failing along the way. But I love your mindset and your perspective on failing. If we're not failing, we're not learning. And if we're not learning, we're not growing. So if we're going to grow through anything, we got to be willing to go through anything. Let me ask you, what advice would you give to someone who's listening saying, hey, I had this idea in mind for years, but I haven't taken action yet. Or I feel like I'm just not ready. I'm not motivated. I'm not confident yet. What advice are you giving to say, take action now, and how can they do it?
Yeah. And I'm hoping this isn't too discouraging, but I would say no one is ever ready. Nobody ever,
Yeah.
because you don't know the future. Like you could be ready today and technology could change tomorrow and then you're not ready again. But I think the name of the game, if you want to be successful in something that you don't know anything about, or you don't have any experience yet, and you kind of just want to take a step towards it, I would say just like do the next right thing. Like what is the first thing that you would want to do? Like write that kind of stuff down and just take that first step. You don't have to leap from 1 to 100, but like maybe read that book that's about that topic, or maybe start following that podcast that's about the topic and start getting some inspiration and writing things down. There's a lot of people that reach out to me that want to do like start putting out content, for example, on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn's a scary place for professionals. I don't know what it is, but people are just very afraid to put out their thoughts on this platform. And some of the smartest people I know that so many people could learn from are afraid to put themselves out there and really get started. And what I always tell them is that you just have to, like, you just have to stand up to that fear and lean in a little bit and try to find some fun in that fear and go for it. Like, what is the worst thing that could happen? What is the worst thing? And then what is the best thing?
Yes, love that. Yeah, what's the best thing that can happen? So where do you think that fear is rooted from?
I think it's people's opinions. Like especially with LinkedIn, I always say in like my talks, it feels like you're in the middle of town square on a soapbox, and everybody has an individual bag of tomatoes, and like everyone's just waiting for you to say something wrong, and then they're all going to publicly throw tomatoes at your face. And that's how the feeling around LinkedIn, but I don't know that it's actually true. And I think people really struggle being themselves these days too on social media. And that's what almost makes it harder because you're trying to figure out, oh, well, who should I be? How should I sound? How should I look? What should my background be like? And you're asking all these questions that are actually just stopping you from being a human on a video or being a human and typing out, your thoughts. And honestly, these days with all the AI stuff, I think being human is one of our best superpowers. Like I
Yes.
put videos out there all the time where I say too much, and I don't necessarily, look like I'd want to look, but I'm like, I'm also a mom and I have two toddlers running around and I work from home. So like I try to like show that facade, right?
Yeah.
And humans connect to that and we don't want to lose that either.
Love that. We connect through authenticity, humility, vulnerability. You're talking about authenticity, the importance of it. As a leader, we know that we want to influence those that we're leading, but we can't influence if we can't connect. And so that authenticity helps us connect. I'm going to go back to something you shared earlier about how when you take action, when you do it scared, for lack of better terms, you're also casting a vision for your team. You're helping them understand the vision that you're picturing and that we're driving towards. Let me ask you, Jacki, if you're providing advice to a listener right now who, a lot of our audience are shop owners or store managers in an automotive repair shop, what advice could you give them on how to cast a vision? Because buy-in for a lot of shop owners is a challenge that I hear often. They don't believe in it, they don't buy into it, or how can I cast a vision? I'm going to ask you, how can we cast a vision?
I think, and it's kind of a good follow-up from your previous question, but first read the book Starts with Why, because that is huge to know exactly why, and not just like in generally saying, like, why exactly is this vision important? What, like this mission, why is this important? What's it going to do? That is really what should spark the fire in everybody. If they know why they're doing it and they
Yeah.
believe in that message and they want that too, that's like the first step. Understand exactly why you are doing it and what the results could be.
When the why is clear, the how is easy. And that's something that so many of us just need. You said you have two toddlers. I'm sure one question they ask you a lot: why? I mean, kids ask why, and I think as we grow, as we get older, as adults, the hope is that folks around us, including ourselves, are asking why, not for the sake of challenging, but for the sake of understanding. And when the why is clear, the how is easy because we have an understanding now. Jacki, this is a leadership podcast, so I'm going to ask you, what does leadership mean to you?
I think it means being somebody that people look up to and want to follow in some reason or another. And I think leaders have to have something worth following, right? And I think that all ends up coming back to taking care of other people, it not being all about you. It's not an ego thing. It's all about the vision that you're pulling everybody else to, and everybody's kind of walking in the same direction or running in the same direction, depending on what you're trying to do. And really making it about serving others that are following you. And those are the types of people that people look at as leaders, and that, you don't even know all the people in your life that you're looked at as a leader, right? Who you're inspiring and who you're serving in the end, and who looks up to you because of it. So, yeah.
Very, very well said. You're talking about servant leadership and how at the heart of it all, you're able to serve people in a way that will help them grow and develop into better people. And so that's incredible to hear. Let's shift gears a little bit, Jacki. So you mentioned you are a content creator. You're the content director for the Auto Care Association. I know a lot of listeners, and even myself, a lot of folks struggle with regularly feeling comfortable about posting content, or even if it's because we're concerned about the opinions of others. Which, by the way, something that we should all recognize is people don't think about us as much as we think they think about us. So that's a concept to remember. But I'll speak for myself in this particular question. There are times when I want to post something, but I don't know how to do this awesome mashup or, content editing and producing. Can I ask you, like, what resources are available for someone who wants to post on social media to gain exposure? Or what advice could you give to the listener saying, how can I just be more active on social media in general? Like, what I know it's a pretty broad question, but what advice could you give us?
Yeah, it's hard to do that generally, but like it depends on your medium a lot. Like I always tell people LinkedIn, like if you don't feel comfortable editing video like crazy, like TikTok style, I think talking head videos still work on LinkedIn. It's just about getting your message out. It doesn't have to be flashy. It can be, and it's a way to stand out right now, but it doesn't have to be. So I would first of all remove that fear from you and be like, it's okay to go back. You know what ranks the highest on LinkedIn right now is a text post without an image. So
Really?
yeah, it's really, and it changes every year. So I don't, if you're watching this a year from now, don't mark my words on that. But honestly, it's like, LinkedIn is unique that way. But if you're going to go on Instagram, yeah, it helps to have those cool transitions and things like that. But how many people do you know? Like I follow a few people on Instagram that have a phone in their car and that's their video every single time. They're not doing all that crazy editing and stuff. And if you're into that and you find that to be really fun, go for it. CapCut is a great app that I have on my phone that, when I try to do it a little bit here and there, but it's just not something that it drains me more than anything. So I
Sure.
don't do it a whole lot. It's hard enough to come up with the thoughts and ideas and the content. So, I'm very basic with my content because of that. It's just not something that gives me energy. You only
Yeah.
have so much to give. So I think it's totally okay to not get flashy with it.
This is encouraging to hear, Jackie, because you're right. It does take, I mean, if you're utilizing a lot of resources like CapCut and others that are out there, it can be time consuming. And I mean, you're a busy working mom of two toddlers. And so there's a lot going on in your life. And so it's a good reminder that authenticity is going to rule the day. And so being able to just jump in a car, put the phone in front of your face and just talk, like let people know what's on your heart. People are going to connect with that. So I personally needed to hear that. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, and if it's helpful, I do these personal branding talks, and one of the first things I say is, it's a quote from I think Dale Carnegie, and it's that people do business with people they know, like, and trust.
Yes.
If
Yep.
long as people know you and you're showing your personality and you're being authentic and they like that about you and you're doing it consistently and they believe what you're saying, they're going to trust you and then they're going to do business with you and they're going to follow you and then you're going to start to build that audience. So I would focus more on the message than on the delivery.
Love that. Something that we share with all of our clients for that we're coaching. We talk about how we have to be able to create two things in an effort to provide two things. We create safety and trust so that we can provide clarity and direction. And we really can't provide clarity and direction if we don't have that safety and trust. And so, again, authenticity is able to help us gain safety and trust. Jackie, you mentioned personal branding. Can you speak about what how important it is for people to brand either themselves or their company? How important is branding, and how can we get started to improve our branding?
Personal brand is really so simple. It's about packaging your experience and your knowledge, your expertise, your values, and it's just about packaging those up in a way to be able to communicate it very simply. And it sounds so easy, but without doing those kind of exercises, like if I were to ask most people on the street today, what are your values?
Yeah.
I would think that you would know those, but you've never actually put words to them or you've never actually written them down and gotten clear about them. And honestly, those values should guide every single thing that you do in your entire life, right? If something that you're doing, whether in your personal life or in your career, doesn't align with your values, then you're heading in the wrong direction. I can promise you that. So if you're looking for clarity and direction, do a values exercise 100%. But it's all about being able to build a reputation, and a lot of it too is digital. Having a digital presence these days is more important than ever, and there's so much research out there of what a digital presence can do for professionals and business owners who just get started, for people that have been in it for 10, 20 years, and how it can accelerate your growth. And then people who are in Q4 of their careers, who start putting out information about themselves, who figure out a way to talk about all their accolades and figure out how to talk about your accomplishments in your story and bring people along on your journey and what that can actually do. And all those personal branding exercises that you can do to kind of figure out how you come across to people. What's your personality like? It doesn't mean you have to change your personality, but do you know what your personality is? You
Mm.
know, do you know your 5 dimensions of personality, and like, do you like it? If you don't, does it align with your values? Are you trying to be more approachable in your values, and you're like, I want people to be able to come to me for help, but then you're not an approachable person. There's something that's not aligned there, and there's a lot of changes you can make. And personal branding is a humongous can of worms, but it's so important that people think about that. And I would say, like, early on, even if, whatever you are doing in your career, early on, do some of those exercises. And if you're not early on and you're kind of seasoned in your work, it's still so important to understand what your brand is today. We all have one. We all walk around flying flags. Do we like those flags? I think that's the biggest question.
Love that. So I've heard Rory Vaden talk about how your personal brand is the digitization of your reputation, and you talked about how the digital exposure is so important. Can I ask you? You talked about bringing people along your personal journey, and when we what we know about social media is we can get on social media and we can see everyone seems to be thriving. I mean, everyone is just living a picture perfect life based on what social media tells us. How important it is, how important is it to embrace vulnerability and share much more of your journey than just the highs and the wins?
So I got really comfortable being vulnerable, especially online on LinkedIn. And it's actually made me more approachable to people, which is really what I want. I want people to see a human in me, right? And I want other people to feel like they do belong, right? And if all you ever see is someone's highlight reel and they only ever look super confident, and they never talk about the fact that they're running a podcast and they actually don't know what they're doing. And it's like, it feels like you're building a plane while you're flying it. And there's a lot of anxiety around it, but it's going well. And, like, if all you ever do is show all of your successes, and you never talk about the journey, you never talk about the doubts you had, you never talked about that time you did a public speaking event and you were so nervous, but you did it, and you were so happy you did it, and you can breathe now. And even if you're never going to do it again, like, talk about the journey part. That's the part that people connect with. Like you said, if you want, as a leader, to connect with people, tell people, like, I know you're scared. Like, I've been there and I have been scared too, but then I stood up and I went and I did it, and I'm glad that I did. So I know that you can do it too. And you can't get to that level of leadership without showing your human side too, and helping people see a little bit of themselves in you.
The posts that I've made on LinkedIn or Instagram or any kind of social media platform, the ones that typically get the most engagement are the ones where I'm really expressing some vulnerability and talking about how hard things have been, or how hard things are, and really kind of going through this thing right now to hopefully grow through this thing right now. And so I think what you're sharing is, again, a good reminder for me. I feel like this episode is for me, Jacki. So thank you for being here today. This has been excellent. So you mentioned earlier about a core value or a values exercise. So a couple questions. Number one, are you willing to share with us what your values are and how you make decisions based on those values? And furthermore, at the very least, could you share with us how to get started on a values exercise? You mentioned writing it down, which I think is a great step. What else can we do if we want to jump into a values exercise?
So my values are, my number one is to spread love in the world. And so if there's ever anything that I feel like posting someday and I ask myself, I'm like, is this spreading love? If not, then I shouldn't be posting it. It's really kind of like a great guiding light in my entire life.
Love that.
Another one is to be authentic all the time. So to try to take off the masks, to try to, if I'm upset, to just be upset, but to, like, find ways to communicate that and not try to hide everything and hold everything in. Optimism, thinking and acting with optimism, making sure that I'm always offering hope to people and not being that dire person at the office.
Can I ask you, Jacki? I want to stop you if you don't mind, because optimism. This is something that one of my 5 steps to effective communication is to always be positive. And I always say, like, you can interchange that word positive with optimistic. Can I ask you, from a leadership perspective? I think a lot of folks might hear like this optimistic leadership and think everything's always going to be sunshine and rainbows. And you and I know that's not the case. But how can a leader remain optimistic in times of challenges and just tough times in general?
I look at optimism more like the vision. So optimism means there's hope that things are going to be better. This is where we're going to be one day. It's hard right now. We're in the messy middle. This is all happening, but it's all happening because this is where we're going, and where we're going is great, right? Where positivity is walking around and saying like everything's fine when you're like in the middle of a burning building, right? Like that's being positive is great. Being able to see the positive things in a situation is really great. It's also important to acknowledge the negative things. So to me, those are 2 different things. And like, yeah, some people will focus on the negative, right? And they'll fixate on that. Some people will focus on the positive and fixate on that. And that's 2 different strategies. And you kind of need both people, right? But optimism is more like, let's remember where we're going. Let's remember why we're doing this. Let's remember why we are on this journey in the first place, and that it was never going to be easy, but this is what's making us better and better every single day. And we're going to eventually get to that vision.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying that the challenges is necessary to get there. Like it's part of the journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're not having challenges, you might not be moving, you might not be progressing. You have to have challenges.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Growth and comfort can't coexist. Okay, so what else? Sorry, I cut you off because I wanted to hang on that optimism for a second, but you mentioned spread love, authentic all the time, optimism. What else?
I think the other one is inclusivity, making sure that, and that kind of goes alongside of the authentic self is wanting people to see themselves doing hard things because they see a vulnerable person doing hard things. So it's kind of my own spin on inclusivity is, no matter who you are, where you are, what you're trying to do, you should be included in, being able to do what you love, whatever that might be. And just to know that there's like, if the more of us that can show our authentic selves and be vulnerable on here, the more other people are going to be able to do that too. And there's just some leaders that need to come out and show that first. So I love the inclusivity piece as well.
A friend of mine shared with me years ago how if we got a glimpse into everyone's story, like if we knew everyone deeper than just a surface level, we couldn't help but love them. And I think everything that you're sharing today, Jacki, is it kind of that message comes to mind because I mean, even your first value, spread love. I mean, I'm hearing this: just be kind, spread love. Not only inclusivity for us, but inclusivity for others. I think for a leader, the best ability is availability, and you're making sure that people are welcomed, that they're feeling a certain kind of feeling that's not going to be forgotten. And one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou, she says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel." And everything you're describing is that kind of concept. Like you get to make people feel a certain kind of way that is not going to be forgotten. And so you talked about earlier how we get an opportunity to influence people. Some of them we never even met, but it's this ripple effect that you're able to create based on how you show up for people and specifically how you show up authentically. Man, English is a tough language sometimes. So very good. So, Jacki, last question as we begin to wrap up this episode. What is the greatest piece of advice you've ever received from a mentor or a coach?
Sure. And I would have answered this different probably a year ago, just so you know. But my newfound advice is so simple, but it's consider the source. And I have to explain it a little bit. But growing up, I always just tried to fall in line, do what I was supposed to do. People would tell me, this is a career path you should take. And I would say, okay, and I don't ask a lot of questions. I just try to do everything right, be the overachiever, do everything everybody wants me to do. Very people pleasing. That's like how I did my whole life. And like when I really started doing scarier things, started putting myself out there a little bit more, started doing the things that really fed my fire, some people didn't like it. And it just crushed me because I wasn't used to not being liked, or I wasn't used to not getting praise. I wasn't used to being the butt of the joke. And it really made me fall on my face. Like I couldn't, I was just frozen in time for like a month. I couldn't post. I couldn't do anything. I was just like, it just really jolted me. And looking back, it seems so silly. But one of my mentors who kind of talked me through that time, she said, consider the source. He's like, think about who's saying this stuff.
Yeah.
They're not doing anything, right? They're not leaders in this field. So like, you know, I would say as you, especially as you lead and especially as you start to do hard things, listen to feedback. It's so important to listen to feedback, but consider the source.
Yeah.
Think about who's telling it to you and think about what their goals are for one and what's their experience. Don't just listen to every piece of advice that you get from anybody, right? Everybody's got advice. It's amazing how many people know things about things that they've never done, right?
Right.
Anyone in marketing would understand that, right? But I would just say consider the source, thank them for their feedback, but consider the source.
Love that. I think that's such a good reminder that we all need to hear. It makes me think about the 4 agreements. One of those 4 agreements is don't take things personally. And it can be challenging when you start doing something that other people don't think you should be doing, and we very quickly get their opinions even when we're not asking for it. And that noise can be quite loud, or it can be just noise in the background. But it starts up here. And if you're watching, I'm pointing to my head here. It starts in between the ears. And so consider the source. Love that advice. That is arguably the best answer I've gotten from that question on any guest on this episode or on this podcast. So thank you for that, Jacki. So now it's the last question. I think I unintentionally lied earlier. Now it's the last question. Jacki, how can our audience get in touch with you?
Oh, sure. Probably the best place is on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I do try to share, some of these concepts and some tips and tricks with personal branding, and you can always follow my journey as I taking on new challenges all the time at work, and I try to share those journeys on there. So that's probably the best spot.
Awesome. Jacki Lutz, Lutz, on LinkedIn. I follow your journey, Jacki. I really appreciate you and what you do for the industry, and really value and respect and admire your authenticity. And so I'm going to keep on supporting you and advocating for you. I'm asking every listener, go follow Jacki Lutz. She is great at what she does. Jacki, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. This was fun. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening. Every week, we look to transform our leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results. So again, thank you for listening. Have a great day, everyone. Don't forget to tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. I'm Josh Parnell, reminding you to keep leading well.